get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. There's rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Take a one-way ride, steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to disappear for a night, just to give into the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Monday, June 15th. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm the People's Pundit, Rich Barris, and you guys can follow me right there if you don't already on Twitter. All right. We got a lot to catch up on because we missed a couple of shows last week because of moving. That's just how it's going to have to be, folks. I'm getting too old for this, right? But first and foremost, let's cover what we got to cover today. And then we'll catch up on what we missed from the last couple of weeks. All right. So this morning, first things first, the Empire State Manufacturing Survey. This is the latest in what the entire point of this show is, which is that optimism is rebounding in this country. And that is a good thing, right? So this morning, the Empire State Manufacturing Index crushed the forecast. It's still about even now. So we're like 0.2 of a percentage point in contraction territory. But there are two headline indicators that the New York Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, puts out for this survey. That is the current and expected. Over the last 2 months, this survey's climbed nearly 80 points. Look at this trend. Look at that. We are almost back to where we were pre-COVID shutdown, pre-economic suicide, right? And that's good. And because we missed a few the other day, we're going to have to go over them because this is one story in a greater context here. And then, of course, before we get into the rest of the story, what we're going to talk about today is what we've been dying to get to now for a while, which is the ever-changing electoral map. All right. Now, let me just comment on that real quick before we get into the rest of this. There are, I don't want to say no such thing, but almost no such thing as walls. Blue walls, red walls. Walls are meant to be broken in electoral politics. And we're going to talk about how the map always changes and how one side is better than the other at taking advantage of those changes. All right, but let's hit into the survey. Let's get into good news first. Let's start the morning out on a positive note. The New York Federal Reserve Empire State Manufacturing Survey rose 48 points in June to negative 0.2 of a percentage point, and optimism soared to the highest level in over a decade. The result in May was the second worst reading in the survey's history, but off the all-time low in April. All right, forecasts range from a low of negative 35 to a high of only negative 20. So this reading is a big beat. The consensus forecast was negative 30. Worth noting, Democratic New York Governor Andrew Cuomo extended the lockdown until the end of June, and still the financial sector is not fully operational. So this is, of course, a factory activity, but it goes to show you, like we talked about in Michigan, these policies have real world impact. They really hurt people. And it also goes to show you how this economy could have been burning still, despite what the National Economic Council says. Despite that, this economy could still be burning up right now. All right, the headline General Business Activity Index has now climbed nearly 80 points over the past 2 months. 36% of manufacturing firms reported that conditions improved in June, and an equal percentage reported that conditions had worsened. That's why we're about even right now, okay? The new orders index rose 42 points to a level of around 0, indicating that the quantity of orders was unchanged from last month. Skip all that. You guys can go and read that if you want. It's linked in the YouTube description section, and it's on People's Pundit Daily. You guys can check it out. But the future conditions, business conditions index, which is the expected, what they call expected. What's in the graph, our graph, their graph. There is current and expected. This is the expected. It's really the future business conditions index. It rose 27 points to 56.5%, its highest level in more than a decade. That level has not been matched or exceeded since October of 2009, when it was 56.8. That's solid. That's very good news. And what this really tells us is that, like the jobs report, and hopefully this continues, like the jobs report for May, we're still seeing increased optimism in the economy. We didn't get to go over it last week, but let's read this real quick. And I'm not going to show you this. Let's just go through it, all right? Small business optimism from the National Federation of Independent Businesses reported last week rebounded strongly, 3.5 points in May to 94.4, up from 90.9 and beating the consensus forecast. You're getting a pattern here, starting to see a pattern. 8 of the 10 index components improved, and small business owners expect the recession to be short-lived. Forecast for this index was from a low of 85 flat to a high of just 92.4. The consensus was 92 even. And this is, let me just read something from Bill Duncanberg. He is the chief economist at NFIB. As states begin to reopen, small businesses continue to navigate the economic landscape rocked by COVID-19 and new government policies. It is still uncertain when consumers will feel comfortable returning to small business and beginning to spend again, but owners are taking the necessary precautions to reopen safely. And interesting in here, this is a big, there was a big number in here. The uncertainty index is up. It rose 7 points. That's really no shocker. I mean, people don't know everything about, it's not what is certain about how we're going to get back to normal here is definitely not clear. So having the uncertainty index rise is no shocker. But the expected conditions index gained 5 to a net of 34 after a 24-point decline in April. 52% reported capital outlays in the next 6 months, meaning they're going to spend. They're going to spend, which is, capital expenditures. That's what this is for NFIB. Of those 52%, 35% said they'll spend on new equipment. 20% said they'll buy new vehicles. 15% to improve or expand facilities. 5% to acquire new buildings or land for expansion. And 10% said they'll spend money for new fixtures and furniture. As far as hiring plans, a net seasonally adjusted 8% reported they plan to create new jobs in May. All right. That was up from 1. This is never really a big net number. That in and of itself is pretty solid. And if you go and look at the article on People's Pundit Daily, you'll see that we always we give the regular index, we give the hiring plans, and we give business conditions right before. Let me grab this 1-year trend, and I'll be able to. Right before the tank, hiring plans was doing pretty well. That was at 21, so that's something to compare it to. It was just before March, the March index. It was about 9. So now we're about back to 8. We're almost halfway to the peak for the quarter, for the first quarter. Not bad. Really not bad at all. All right. We're getting back. Where is the good way to put this? And this is a great way to tee it up for the next article that I'm going to read through real quick. But we're getting back to the way people felt right before and almost after Donald Trump won the 2016 election. So yeah, we have a way to go. But that is off of historic lows everywhere. This survey, 43 years, whatever it is, 46 years. The consumer confidence is ticking back up. Consumer sentiment, we missed that. We'll go over that too, the prelim. The prelim for consumer sentiment beat forecasts as well. That was good news. It's not quite there. It's not quite to post 2016 levels, but it's not at, all-time deep recession lows, right? And then as far as hiring plans, before I skip over this and move out of the NFIB, hiring plans jumped to 8, a net 8, and that came off the heels of that. That's for the same month as that big beat with the employment situation, the 2.5 million record jobs created, the largest on record. All right, so I mean, it's all to take in context. Another indicator, the Rasmussen Economic Confidence Indicator, they are also, and that was even in their title, back to 2016 levels. As more of the country exits the lockdown and the stock market climbs to pre-pandemic levels, economic confidence is on the rebound, jumping 16 points from last month to 109.8 in June. This finding is comparable to the level of confidence Americans held just prior to President Trump's 2016 election. All right, and enthusiasm, just for context, enthusiasm about the economy started to grow in this index immediately after Trump was elected in November of 2016. It jumped to 147.8 by January of 2020. So it rose hard, it rose fast. Then it began its steep decline in February as it became clear we were going to have to enter these lockdowns. Many Americans thrown out of work. We all know the story. Many businesses closed, sometimes for good, unfortunately. And it retreated to basically the level that it was under President Obama's final year in office. The high for Obama in his final year in office was 121.5. That was January of 2015. It was only at 108.1 his last month in the White House. So 32% of American adults now, again, rate the economy as good or excellent, which is for June. This indicator is not a lagging indicator like some of these other ones that we've been reading. That's why, take it all into context, take it in the trend. But that's up 9 points from last month. 39% say the economy is poor, down 5 points from May. 32% rate 26% think the economy is getting better, up 13 points from a month ago. 52% still expect the economy to worsen somewhat, but that's a 10-point improvement from May. 15% see things staying about the same. By comparison, just prior to the 2016 election, 31% rated the economy as good or excellent, and 26% expected it to get better. Now, of course, Barack Obama lost, right? So you better hope if you're a Trump supporter, this number gets higher as we get closer to the election, of course. But again, this is for June. They'll release their July in about 3 weeks, and we'll know. But it's also back from the doldrums to pre-2016 levels. If this indicator and other indicators begin to really improve a lot better, then it's good news for Donald Trump. Then it's good news for Trump supporters. Why? Because this goes to the heart of his justification. You should know what that means by now. You should know what I'm saying, what I'm talking about when I say justification. Donald Trump said, hire me, I'll stop the managed decline. Donald Trump said, hire me, I'll stop the hollowing out of our communities and our neighborhoods. Go ahead and hire me, and I will stop the experts from dismantling the greatness of this country. Now, there is a real kick, which somewhat hurt the look. The market took off like a bat out of hell last week. There's been a lot of talk about a resurgence in this virus. Okay? I'm not sure I buy it just because, well, not that I'm not sure, I don't buy it. Just because there are more cases and more testings does not mean we're going to have a resurgence of this virus. There are some places where hospitalizations are getting a little bit, and we got to keep our eye on that with Texas. But there has also been more activity. Is it because the economy is opening up? Is it because of these protests? I don't think we'll ever know that. But what we do know is that there's an effort to put this comeback on halt, to put it on pause. They're going to try to do that within an hour apart, within an hour. Yesterday, NBC News reported about the protests on race relations and policing. Nothing to do. No criticism of the crowd. And about an hour later, they reported about Trump's campaign stop coming up and how he's going to go another place outside of Oklahoma. And that experts are worried. So we know this is coming. We know this is coming. Again, I'm not 100% sure. Do we have that Samadhi clip? You know what? I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not a doctor. I know numbers, but I'm not a doctor. And I think it's probably best if we leave that up to them, but doesn't mean Donald Trump has to let the experts run amok in this country. The American voters elected him to put an end to that, to put an end to this. I mean, of course you can listen to expert advice. There's nothing wrong with that. But public health experts were not elected to run the country. National security experts are not elected to run the country. They get countries in war. That's what they do. That's their business. The very same public health experts that are trying to stop this comeback signed letters praising the protests in support and solidarity of these protests. Why? Because racism causes the coronavirus. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up. You cannot make it up. But here we are. Do we have that? I really wanted to get the Samadhi clip. All right. And yeah, we do have it. Let's play this Dr. Samadhi clip.
Coronavirus crisis, but it looks like the crisis is over. The crisis part is over, isn't it?
Well, a lot of good news, Greg, that's coming through the pipeline. But the problem is that a lot of public health are making statements. For example, I'm concerned about the second wave. And you can see the ripple factor in our Wall Street, in our stock market, and also a lot of people who are about to go back and open up their stores. They panic. And this is the problem with any kind of pandemic. We as Americans, we have to be very careful not to let fear, panic, hysteria, which is part of the DNA of the pandemic, to get ahead of facts, strength, and be able to, and science, and be able to get back to work. Look at what's going on in New York City, which was a hot spot. We have now one of the lowest number of deaths in this state. We have only 1% of the people that have gotten the test are positive. 52 admissions, which is extremely low, and this is all good. So what's going on? And the big news is that, in my opinion, this was nothing but a nursing home disease and went after elderly and people who had comorbidities. If we would have taken care of our nursing home, 5 million people in our nursing home in America was responsible for over 40% of death in this country. And if we would have taken care of that correctly, these numbers would be much lower than flu, and we didn't have to make unemployments of 40 million. What's the lesson learned to a lot of people out there, Greg, you would say? There's not going to be a major second wave in America. I promise you. We're going to have a lot of these baby waves, as we see in Arizona, in Texas, but you're not going to see some mass numbers of people being affected by this. And that's what we're going to see, which is all good news.
Totally. Bold statement. Dr. Fauci's not saying that. I am going with you, doctor. I'm serious. You've been right about so much in this thing. So, all right, no second wave. That's good. Real quick, Wuhan virus, when it was in Wuhan, there's evidence now that this thing was being dealt with in August. They didn't tell anybody until January.
Well, interestingly enough, you and I covered this, and without even having this information.
Yeah, I mean, I cut that off, but I look, like I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm a numbers guy. And he used the term there, this mini wave, right? And when I look at Texas is one. So what I said before about hospitalizations, Texas is one. So we're seeing a little bit of a resurgence in hospitalizations. But the point of the lockdowns, all right, and keep this in mind when you hear these people, because I think it's beyond debate anymore, that people use these lockdowns, they use coronavirus to hurt Donald Trump and to further their own political agenda. I mean, this isn't even, if you didn't know that before, then look at the difference in their reactions between, getting back to work and people protesting to survive, for their economic survival, and people protesting over the death of George Floyd and other race relations. And by the way, the left knows how to organize, because a lot of this stuff is, some of it, look, when it came to the protests about economics, there's always some level of organization, but for the most part, we were looking at something organic there. These people were fighting and protesting peacefully, by the way, for their survival, not for a political agenda. Very different. And if you didn't know beforehand whether or not people were willing to put 40 million plus Americans out of work because they are furthering a political agenda, then I don't know what else you need now to convince you of that. Many of those same political experts who are saying, you're a grandma killer if you go out and protest your right to the pursuit of happiness, because that's what Jefferson meant. That's why they took out what Locke said with simply property, and they replaced property in the Treatise of Government with the pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence, because of what they felt work meant to the human spirit, the human mind. Labor is more than just work. Let me put it that way. These were people who believed in the calling, which is a Protestant idea from back, from 17th and 18th century Protestant idea that's remained with us ever since, a large group of us, that not only do you have a duty to work, not only should you work, but that God actually calls you to work. Because idle hands do the devil's work. Where do you think we got that from? Idle hands do the devil's work. That's why they replaced that. Yet they had a problem with that, but they didn't have a problem. And they mentioned Dr. Fauci in there. I've had this thing loaded for days, and I haven't been able to play. I was like, in a good time for this. I just want to remind everybody about, the great Dr. Fauci, how inconsistent this man has been. He's just like everybody else. It's something with this field. No offense to you if you're a longtime healthcare worker. But I think it's pretty clear this profession, like others that we've spoken about over the last few weeks, perversion of science and data. If you missed that episode, go check it out. I think it's pretty clear that this is one of the worst perverted industries as far as politics.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some schmutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course. But when you think masks, you should think of healthcare providers needing them and people who are ill.
Yeah, so there's Dr. Fauci from months ago telling us at the time, there's just not enough PPE. That was the situation over there. There was not enough PPE at that time to be encouraging the entire population to wear masks. So we told you a story. The truth is, like one of the commenters in the comment section just said before, I was looking at it when these clips were playing, there was never enough data to make these definitive statements that we heard from these people in order to justify these lockdowns. So here the American worker, the American small business owner, American ingenuity is trying to claw its way back from yet another stupid, ahistorical decision by the experts, and they're trying to stifle them again. They are trying to stifle them because there is an election 140 days out. And because they want a certain person to lose and a certain person to win. So they're willing to turn a blind eye to hundreds of thousands of inorganic protesters storming the streets while opposing the right, which, by the way, these lockdowns are probably unconstitutional. One day we'll answer that question, hopefully one day soon, because they're going to try this again. This will not be the last time the Chinese unleash some pathogen on the rest of the healthy world. And they will try to do this again because we allowed them to set the precedent to do this. We allowed them to lie to us. And if there's no consequence for that, that's why we have to, then they'll do it again. That's why we have to pause, and we cannot let them move on from one crisis to the other. Even if they look ridiculous because they supported one and not the other. They ignored their own logic and justification for opposing one group of American citizens to protest while supporting another. We cannot allow them to just jump to the next crisis without being held accountable for their mess ups on the last one. And Americans it never ceases to amaze me how American workers, the power of American ingenuity and resilience. We are the most resilient economy in the history of the world. And there are people behind those numbers. There are people behind those numbers. And they tell an amazing story. They're inspirational as hell. And they're just, once again, trying to end that. They're trying to suffocate, is a better word. They're trying to suffocate that ingenuity, that resilience, that American spirit, which is what it really is about. It's really a human spirit when humans have a fundamental agreement on certain principles. And that's where we are now. A fight for those. 10:30 already. First segment down, and I had more I wanted to play. But whatever, we'll just blend it into the next one, right? So it's 10:30, and you are watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm the People's Pundit, Rich Barris, and you guys can follow me on Twitter right there if you don't already, at Peoples_Pundit. Do not forget to like the page on Facebook, People's Pundit Daily, and don't forget to, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel to give you the heads up about when we're about to go give you a heads up before we're about to go live. All right. Some people are telling me on the thing that, I don't get the notification. I didn't know. It didn't tell me. Hit the notification bell. That's what that's for. It's not apparently it's not always good enough to just subscribe to the channel. You got to get that notification bell, and that will tell you when we're about to go live. Of course, the best way to support the best data journalism website on the internet is to subscribe to PPD. And that is, the best way to support the show is to do so. Subscribe to the best data journalism website on the internet. Get some data for your dollar. We not like we're opposed to you guys sending, because we got a couple emails about donating. How do we donate to you guys? Just subscribe. We do have a PayPal me thing. And Laura, if you want to shoot it out to them, I guess you can, but why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just subscribe? If you're a subscriber and you still want to support, then I get that. But get some data for your dollar. I don't want to be one of these, donate shows. Get something for your money, right? We go through these economic indicators on the show, and much of the time, if you're a subscriber, I'm reading off of what we put up there, and I'm showing you the charts. That's where you're getting them from. So if you want to play around with the 1 year, 3 year, whatever, you want to look at the trends the way I show them to you, that's the way to do it. So while we appreciate you supporting it, we'd rather get some value for your money. There's just too much of that on the internet now. There's just how many people in the last 3 years have amassed huge followings on Twitter and on social media and other places, put out their GoFundMe pages, their PayPal me's, all that crap, while spinning up these crazy tales to you, which was never supported by any kind of evidence or fact, right? Spinning up these tales about, Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein are really working secretly with Robert Mueller to take down the deep state. This was always nuts. You will never get any of that crap on PPD. That's not what we do. But for some reason, people talk to me they want to open up like I'm Barbara Walters or something. So we'll get these stories, while primarily we cover data journalism. I'm not going to not report something when I have a scoop. So we do that. We will never spin you tall tales like that. Never. And we did do a show on it the day it happened. But when you're talking about how many of these people, we just don't want to be a part of that grift. There is a huge grift on the internet, political grift. Support me and I'll do my research or whatever it is. The slow walker, white hat crap. Get some value for your money. Some news that you can actually trust. After 2016, we moved largely over to policy and economics because there's just too much crap out there. We'll cover the politics end of it. It's garbage. It's garbage to go out there and spin these tales. If you want some clickbait headlines, there are plenty, whether you're on the right or the left. If you're on the left and you want fake news, you can go read the Palmer Report. We're not going to do that over here. And believe me, there are myriad sites I can cite on the right. Just not true. All right? So we don't do that over here. We deal in numbers. And if you ever see anything that says, unnamed sources, believe me, we have it stone cold. Because as Madam Producer will tell you, I will not let it go up. And if somebody brings me something and says, oh, so-and-so told me this, I will talk to so-and-so. I will never let some unnamed source citation go up on the site unless you know damn well that I have spoken to that person and verified whatever it is that they had to tell me. Otherwise, the writers can kiss it and go back and develop it and get someone on the record, because we don't play like that over there. All right, over here. That is not what we do. That is not how we roll. And if it says unnamed sources, rest assured, I know the name. All right, because it's not going out without it. All right. So it's 10:35 already. I wanted to, before we get opening up, speaking of back to data, I suppose in order to lay the foundation for this, I really need to read a couple of backstories. People always say, well, why don't you believe in this blue wall crap, red wall crap? And it takes a backstory for me to explain this to you. Now, of course, there are states that, a Democrat cannot win. There are states where a Republican cannot win. There are more of those than there are of the former, which is bad news if you are a Republican. That's just true. Or I would say there are more electoral votes for them. But that is a statement that is only true for the here and now. Political coalitions change. They shift. And hopefully by the end of the show, you will know and believe that to be true. But before we go, there's a couple of things I want to laugh at. I just want to laugh at some people. Let's laugh at people a little bit, should we? Because this is stuff we were supposed to do on Freewheel on Friday. And there's just going to be these, and we missed it. You missed out on it, right? So that is just going to happen in these next couple of weeks. Laura and I were talking, and I may even need to do this eventually Monday, Wednesday, Friday until we're done and moved. I just can't handle it anymore. Laura's doing most of the packing. She'll get me back, and when we move, because I'll do most of the moving. But there's just not enough time in a day, and this is something that's been in the works for a long time. So, but also, what, on the flip side of that, folks, each show will be a lot more beefed up with stuff because we'll always have more material than a 2-hour show can take. So it'll be, constant. But on Friday, we were going to do some laughs. We're going to have some laughs. Every week needs to be ended with some funny stuff, right? Every week needs to joke. We need to joke a little bit. We always have to remember to smile, folks, right? We always. So when we were talking about those health experts, these hacks and the media and that help these people, with their revolution, which is definitely what this is. One of the things I'll always tell them behind closed doors is you're really assisting in your own demise. Like, if you think you can placate some of these groups, you're crazy, and you're just helping them to remove you. And if you look at all of these other cultural Marxist revolutions, the first people to go are the idiots that help them, right? They're always the first ones lined up against the wall. But that's not fun, really fun. It's kind of dark to hear, right? So when we get, when we see these examples of these idiots, and I'll wind up playing some, clip it's really beyond bias because it's more of an agenda. We need something to explain the self-destructive act, the suicide of personal existence, that act of committing suicide. We need something to show, to illustrate it. So this is going to be it. Check this out. All right. My search for who created that is on. But that is what, because I gotta hat tip those folks. That is that's what Brian Stelter is doing every day, every evening when he gets on his show that 20 people watch. 20 people who are not forced to watch it sitting in an airport waiting for their flight. That's what Brian Stelter is doing to himself. Okay? Sitting down in a catapult and letting other people launch him into oblivion. Because if he thinks he'll be rewarded for this, let's say they succeed. Let's say the forces of, I would say the combined forces of anarchy, everybody we talked about with Robert Barnes last week. What a great interview, wasn't it? We got to have him back on soon. Great interview. The forces, that is what they're doing. Give it a hot minute. It'll pop back. Okay? Being told really you can't see me, but I'll be back on in a second. You guys can all give me the heads up. Oh, no, I did not lose the video. Let's see here. Am I back now? Can you see me now? You may be lagging. You may be lagging a bit. Yeah, I'll wait for you. Give me the heads up. And I'll ask the producer here in a second. But I'm on here. I mean, I can see it for myself. There you are. Thank you, Joyce. God, everybody takes forever. Come on. I'm looking at the ticker up there. There was enough for you to be able to say that quicker. For the love of God. Yeah, she's probably lagging. I've been forcing her to get in here. She really needs to be in the studio to do this, but it makes her life a little bit easier for now. But she really needs to be here this way. It's quicker. Everything's more instantaneous. But let's get back to this, right? So all these people that we were talking about last week, right? Yeah, all these people we were talking about last week. They think this is they're going to be rewarded for this or something. You are not going to be rewarded for your role in taking down this. If they were to succeed, you will not be rewarded. Your white guilt will not be enough to save you. Your wokeness will not be enough to save you. They are not going to reward you for your help like they didn't with Jacob. Mr. Fry. He was booed right off. It's just not going to happen. It's never going to be enough. It's never going to be enough. Right? Yeah, you remember? Oh, you don't? Okay. Hold on one second. For those who don't remember. Yeah, I mean, this is just the way it's going today, apparently. What in Sam? Can you guys hear me at all? Yeah, no kidding. I think it's just flat slow today. I'm not exactly sure. I don't think there's much I can do about it. I mean, I see myself, but all right. So anyway, that's what's going to happen. Poor Jacob, right? It's just going to be that way. You're not going to be rewarded for your role in this. If you look at it, people need to be, this is a big deal with not studying history. Because this is what happens when you don't study your history. You don't know. anything about what's happened in the past. Those people who aid in revolutions and disruptions are always the first one to be removed. That's how you get rewarded. That's how you get rewarded. All right, so let's jump out of that. Let's get into the numbers, because I've been dying to do this. In 2016, there's a whole bunch of people now that, I knew Trump was going to win, and it was pretty damn lonely out there. I don't know where the hell these people were on election night, because I didn't see them. I don't remember them. It's pretty hard to forget because there were so few of us. It's not like you forget who was in the room with you, the proverbial room. And there were even fewer. I'm talking about people who put themselves on the line. And there were even fewer, a smaller number of people who, either polled publicly or released I would say let's characterize it as an independent election model, because there's a difference between an election model and a poll reader. Okay. If your model shifts and gyrates wildly with the polls and the betting markets, you don't have an election model. You are a glorified poll reader. If your election model gyrates every time there's a new public poll released, you are not an election forecaster or a modeler. You are a glorified poll reader. For the most part, too, putting betting odds into an election model is redundant, because for the most part, election betting odds, at least though, you know what, it has resisted this trend a little bit this year, but it's starting now to revert. Election betting odds are merely, for the most part, reflections of polls. They change as polls change. Trump has largely been down for the duration of this season, at least in public polling. He's largely been down, but the election betting odds were stronger with him. Now the odds have started to move against him because the polling is moving so much further and because we're getting closer to the election itself. So they're starting now to put more stock in polls. That's why, that's the joke Barnes was making last week. The betting markets aren't predictive indicators. They're reflections of polls themselves. Many of these election models are simply glorified poll readers. An election model would only factor in public polls, as along with other variables. The economy, approval ratings, whatever it is that they say may be in that model. Unless you heavily weight that model, let's say they do, and they pretend like they're putting all these other variables into these models. Yet still somehow when the public polls shift to one candidate or the other, their models are shifting with them dramatically. They essentially reflect the polls. They must heavily weight the polling variable over all of the other economic or whatever indicators they're putting into these models in order for them to move and gyrate the way they do. How do I know this? Because our model does not gyrate like that. Polls are not the end-all be-all of the model. In 2018, I wanted to show you this, so we put up 3 different models for the Senate and the governor races. Not really 3 different models, 3 different results. One was the polls. This is what the polls say. Here's the map. Here is the electoral map according to the public polls. If we only go by public polls, this is what the map is going to look like. Here are the winners. Bill Nelson will win in Florida. Joe Donnelly will likely hold on in Indiana. Missouri is too close to call. Texas is too close to call. That was about right. Governor Mike DeWine would never have won the state of Ohio. Richard Cordray would be the governor of Ohio right now. And we went on like that. That was the first tab. Polls only. The second was polls with the model. And the third was the model only without polls in it. If you guys remember, the model outperformed the other two, including the hybrid, because the polls were just so badly wrong in some of these statewide contests. And even with, in a state like Indiana, and this is why I say maybe the states weren't totally wrong. The overall call wasn't wrong, but the projected margin was. So in a state like Indiana, the model said likely Republican, which is traditionally, depending on which year it is, traditionally about greater than 5 to 7 points. Of course it was. But if you were to do the hybrid was only leans Republican. And that was because the other variables, including partisan voting index, economic indicators, whatever it may be, they were outweighing the public polling, showing Donnelly still holding on. Now, if you are a glorified poll reader pretending to be an election forecaster and pretending to be an authority on other people's polling, which you are not because you don't even know the first damn thing about polling, you're not a pollster, you're a half-assed statistician, then your model gyrated wildly, and you were wrong in Indiana. If you are said fake election forecaster, then your model said Bill Nelson was going to hold on and Ron DeSantis was going to lose to Andrew Gillum in Florida. This is why these people, and there's several who fall into this category. We all know who I'm talking about right now. He won't even be named because I don't think he deserves to even be mentioned. He's a joke. One day I'll show you guys some emails too. One day. I'm holding them. I'm holding them for the right time. I'll show you what a joke he is. They are. But there are others that fall into this category, and they will never see the electoral map shifting. It takes more than having a good model or thinking you have a good model to be an accurate forecaster. You have got to know when the map is going to change. And because there are really, and you know what, years ago, before I get into this, let me read what I'm talking about. In 2016, it was May of 2016. According to the other forecasters, and I'll link this below in the YouTube. This way you guys can read it. I'll link it later. If you want to read it, I'll put the whole article in here. But my whole point was why a certain someone was wrong on Donald Trump's chances to beat Hillary Clinton. And then later, by the way, I think it was October, right? Is this other one October? September. I wrote why he was still wrong. And I went through an article I've been through on this show before where we looked at general election polling over the last, in the modern era, going back to the Dewey versus Truman. There have been misses before. I wish we were still in an era where it was just Gallup, because we can make apples to apples comparisons then. Now we're comparing apples to oranges and pineapples and kiwis and strawberries. There are too many polls and not enough pollsters. That is one of our major problems. But in May of that time period, this was before it was clear Donald Trump was going to be, this is when it was clear Donald Trump was going to be the Republican nominee. Prior to that, almost all of these election forecasters said that a Republican candidate, generic Republican candidate, had at least a 50-50 chance of winning. And that is because that is one of the, what's the word I'm looking for? the rare times that they told you the truth. They were looking at the fundamentals, things that really predict elections. It is difficult for a party to win 3 consecutive terms in the White House. Typically. Hillary Clinton was always going to be a rather weak candidate. There were things there that we knew were at play. So that gave a generic Republican at least a 50-50, shot. But then when it became clear that Donald Trump was going to be the nominee, everybody started to go, to tip their scales. It was 70-30 in favor of Clinton and the Democratic Party, 80-20. And then it only got worse as we got closer to the election. And my entire point was that this was very off base. He was a stronger candidate than Jeb Bush was ever going to be. He was a stronger candidate than Marco Rubio was ever going to be. He was a stronger candidate than Ted Cruz was ever going to be. Why? Because of the map, the electoral map, and because he was a working class Republican. His message was a populist message. Republicans, as they continue to be generally, are in deep trouble in the Electoral College. They needed a dramatic change to change the electoral map, not just compete on the one that the media and the Democrats want them to stay confined within, those boundaries. The typical, maybe they can flip Virginia again if they hang on to every single one and eke out Iowa and New Hampshire. Maybe they can get 2 or 3 more electoral votes like George W. Bush in 2004, the last time they won the popular vote. That's what it'll take. That's the map. And it never was the map. That was their dying map. That was their map as a force, a dying national political force. And of course, that's the way the media wanted it. And my entire argument was that is not true. And I want to read you from this, but I'm going to skip over a lot because I need to skip over the person I'm referencing here. But unlike electoral politics, and I was comparing it to something Sean Trendy wrote. It was brilliant about the limitations on data journalism. And he was using blackjack as a comparison. I don't know. Some of you may have read this. It was great. I like Sean's work a lot, to be honest. All right. So I was using his example I was piggybacking off of it and explaining why, while he made very good, valid points, he was wrong. All right. So unlike electoral politics, the game of blackjack only changes insofar as the players. That is to say, the rules and the potential cards in the deck remain the same. I've repeated more times than I can count at PPD and elsewhere that the only thing about political coalitions we can count on being consistent is that they are consistently changing. In the 1940s, no one would have ever guessed that the South would end up reliably Republican. When Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye starred in the classic film White Christmas, no one would have ever guessed Vermont would have been anything other than reliably Republican, on the presidential level particularly. In fact, they make a reference to that in the movie. They make a joke about it, folks. That's a sidebar. That's not a quote. That is a sidebar. They actually joke about how they're going to Vermont. Well, what's in Vermont? Republicans. Back to quotes here. No one would have ever foresaw the Green Mountain State giving 85.69% of the Democratic primary vote in 2016 to their home state socialist senator. U.S. political history is riddled with endless examples of political shifts. Successful election forecasters should not only know the map on the presidential level isn't static, but also learn how to recognize when that map is shifting. Hypotheses centering on blue walls and even red walls once upon a time are destined to fail eventually. The last time we saw a mainstream denial of this fact in a presidential election was in 2000, when George W. Bush shocked forecasters by completing the migration of the voters formerly in the Ross Perot coalition, among other things, to the Republican Party. The result was a political shift on the presidential map that included the state of Kentucky. You would have never have guessed. On Tuesday, Mrs. Clinton barely eked out a win, and that was that Tuesday, in the Bluegrass State, a state her husband carried twice when he ran for president in 92 and 96. To be sure, polls are important when making election predictions, but they aren't the end-all be-all. If they were, the political observers, junkies, and news consumers should not need forecasters like myself and others at particular places. And if they insist on simply poll reading and selling their takes on polls as analysis, then I submit none of their forecasts have any value. All right. And it is 11 o'clock now. When we come back, we're going to get in the time machine. And this is something Robert and I also spoke about last week. Some of you asked about it on Twitter after the show. We talk now about the blue wall. Once upon a time, it was all about the red wall. And it didn't hold. Neither did the blue wall in 2016. Is it possible, maybe just possible, that we should stop thinking about these things as walls, as if they could never fall, as if they'll be there forever, like the Great Wall of China or something? Walls they break, they come down. Political coalitions, the only thing we can count on with political coalitions being consistent is that they consistently change. Even in this era of partisanship. All right, it is 11:01, almost 11:02. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back after Bad Habit from the Grammy-nominated Bowen Band. Be back in a hot minute, folks.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker, so just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. There's rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Damn, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Take a one-way ride, steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to spear for a night, just to give in to the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
All right, we're back. Last week, oh, by the way, again, that was the Grammy-nominated band Bowen. And if you, real quick before we get into walls and the fabrication of walls in our minds to explain current conditions in electoral politics, if you know somebody that you think is talented and you want to see them showcased, you can email us at contact@peoplespunditdaily. Either Laura and I or both will listen, and if we think it's good, we'll shoot it out there and we'll give them some airtime. All right, play them during a commercial or something. But also too, don't forget before you leave to subscribe on YouTube to People's Pundit Daily. If you're on Periscope, it's crappy today. Go on over to YouTube and get a cleaner stream, or Facebook Live and get a cleaner stream. All right. Don't forget to like the page People's Pundit Daily on Facebook. All right. Last week when we were talking to Barnes, we were talking about Philip Klein. All right. I'm sorry. Jeez, Kevin Phillips. And he at the time wrote this. We hear now a lot about the emerging Democratic majority and the idea that demographics are destiny. Once upon a time in the 60s and in the 70s, particularly after Nixon's reelection, we heard about the emerging Republican majority. And there weren't blue walls. There were red walls. And there was an article in the New York Times about the book. And it's interesting. Again, once the show is over, I'll link it there if you guys want to read it. But the article is about the book. And it's by Warren Weaver Jr. And he's, going over Kevin Phillips' argument. At the time, Nixon had just won. He looked like the most powerful, unstoppable man on the planet. Republicans, as a national party in the Electoral College, looked almost unbeatable. It was difficult, if not almost impossible, to beat a Republican candidate at the presidential level, or so they thought. All right? The hallmark of the Nixon administration, as its spokesman from the president on down like to say, is pragmatism. The standard applied to a program by the pragmatists, Nixonian or otherwise, is not so much is it good or bad, or is it liberal or conservative, but will it work? This rigorous, if not particularly elevating standard has now been applied to the Republican political strategy of 1968 by a young lawyer who worked in the presidential campaign and is now involved in the administration. And sure enough, the answer comes out not only it did work, but, quote, it will continue to work for some time to come in the emerging Republican majority. In fact, Kevin P. Phillips goes considerably farther to argue that there was a sort of cosmic inevitability to the Nixon victory, that the Republican Party has been inexorably gaining strength in unlikely quarters for 24 years, unbeknownst to all but the most sharp-eyed analysts, and that the 1968 election merely represented the crystallization of that strength into an electoral vote majority. The net effect of the Phillips track is to reassure the patchwork constituency stitched together by Richard Nixon in 1968 that it really constitutes a splendid piece of sturdy whole cloth, that the GOP popular majority of 518,000 out of 73.4 million votes cast was only the precursor of a larger and solider majority to come. With an elaborate display of 143 charts and 47 maps, sound familiar? The author seeks to demonstrate that Republican presidents will be with us for some time now because the party's candidates are going to carry the South, the heartland, his term for the area Ohio west to Nevada. Now we use it. By the way, sidebar, now we use that term as if it was always been there. Phillips created that term. And California, as far as political, when we talk about political regions, and California, and that will be more than enough. The Phillips Doctrine thus amounts to the institutionalization, Barry Goldwater's suggestion that the nation might be better off if its northeastern corner were sawed off altogether. All right. I mean, I could continue to go on here, but and allowed to drift into the sea. Yeah, let's go a little bit longer. This is almost precisely what the book urges the Republican Party to do politically to New York and New England. When the political realignment that Phillips foresees has truly come to pass, the Democratic Party, by his estimate, will consist largely of treacherous Yankees who forsook the Republican Party over the past 30 years. Listen, this is the talk back then. This is the New York Times. So I don't want to hear anything out of anybody when I read this. That includes Negroes, Jews, some stubborn Scandinavians, and liberal establishment, which he modestly defines at one point as a, quote, privileged elite blind to the needs and interests of the large national majority, unquote. Establishmentarian is both the longest and vilest adjective in the Phillips lexicon, applying the term flexibly to parties and political eras. He ultimately accuses the establishment of creating, quote, a gap between words and deeds, which helped to drive racial and youthful minorities into open revolt, unquote. Full racial polarization is an essential ingredient of Phillips's political pragmatism. He wants to seek a black Democratic Party, particularly in the South, because this will drive into the Republican Party precisely the kind of anti-Negro white who will help constitute the emerging majority. This even leads him to support some civil rights efforts. And let's go up. Maintenance, this is him now, this is Phil. Maintenance of Negro voting rights in Dixie, far from being contrary to GOP interests, is essential in Southern conservatives if Southern conservatives are to be pressured into switching to the Republican Party. For Negroes are beginning to seize control of the National Democratic Party in some black belt areas, he writes. Is this a clear view of the Nixon administration's political policy? In a preface, Phillips dutifully proclaims the book, quote, does not purport to set forth the past strategies or future intentions of Richard M. Nixon, his campaign organization, or administration, unquote. But the 29-year-old Harvard Law graduate was special assistant to John Mitchell, the Nixon campaign manager, last year, and continued in that title in the Justice Department when Mitchell became Attorney General. And it would be astonishing, indeed, if Phillips's views were at wide variance with these of his employers, one of the president's most influential political advisors. All right, so then they go on to trash basically them personally, which gives no point to advancing our current argument. But almost equally disconcerting is the tacit assumption in the emerging Republican majority that these delusions are all controlling in a presidential election, that the issues and the personalities and capabilities of the candidate count for nothing, that Americans vote only their bloodline, church, neighborhood, or caste. The Phillips book has already become the talk of political Washington, where it is regarded, fairly or not, as the campaign agenda for the second Nixon coming. It is rather clumsily written, highly tenditious, and full of questionable charts and a few egregious mistakes, but it remains one of the most provocative political books of these perplexing days. Now, again, this is his take on it. This is a Warren Weaver Jr. take on it. All right. He's a liberal writing for the New York Times, or I would say he's a liberal in today's eyes, of course. All right. But the entire idea, and there's a little thing, the last thing I'll read here, because this really gets down to the regions. Because the Republicans are little dependent on the liberal establishment or the urban Negro, the two groups most intimately, though dissimilary, concerned with the present urban and welfare policies, they have the political freedom to disregard the multitude of vested interests which have throttled national urban policy. And he goes on to say, basically, to get rid of the areas, to ignore the areas that we consider limousine liberals now. They used to call them that. Now it's woke, which is worse than a limousine liberal, in all honesty. And basically to focus on the heartland, the Rust Belt, the South, and even, by the way, if you noticed, California was part of the Red Wall, the coalition, at this time. Now it's unwinnable. Ronald Reagan twice carried California. He was the governor of California. Now it's thought essentially unwinnable to a Republican candidate. Ohio has gotten redder, even though the polls say it's going to be competitive this time. Even Biden's own polling does not show him winning Ohio. There are areas in the South where the Republicans obviously did hold on. But there are states now out in the Midwest they would carry for cycles to come that have thus changed. And we're watching some of them change right now. Nevada used to be a reliably red state. New Mexico was a battleground. If you watched our voter analysis, you know we went back to 2000, Bush v. Gore, then Bush v. Kerry. Competitive races, to be sure. Colorado, also a competitive state, but one on the presidential level, a decent Republican candidate, like he says in this, like Weaver says in this. The candidate, the issues, the personality counted for something. Demographics, they believed, were not destiny. They took this to be racist. Yet this is essentially Allen's argument for the emerging Democratic majority, which they all buy into. Now the idea of walls is a sound idea. Now demographics are destiny. Now New York is not winnable for a Republican. Now California is part of the automatic Democratic electoral vote count. Things change, is my point here. You could read this and replace the words Republican with Democrat. You could replace all references to them, and it would read like Allen's work. Everybody in media, for the most part, other forecasters, they believe this in some way, shape, or form. The genius to the Trump campaign in 2016 was his ability to finally go back to the way it was when Weaver wrote this, which is to say that once upon a time, candidates' personalities did matter. Their own positions and how they articulated them mattered more than their genes, their bloodline, their church, their neighborhood, or their caste. But we could flip this around, and it's okay to believe it now for them because they believe in blue walls. My question is, and what I'm posing to you here is, do they exist or do we fabricate them to help us, one, explain the time we're living in, the electoral map we're living in, to simplify it for us to understand, and then two, as we always do, to affirm our own beliefs. 30, 40 years ago, even longer, 50 years ago, the left did not believe in this. They mocked him. They mocked the very idea. And yet we're looking at a very different map once upon a time than we're looking at now. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Virginia. That was Nixon country. Democrats won Michigan, Minnesota, New York, and Pennsylvania. And guess what? West Virginia. West Virginia. Okay? Things change. Vermont was a Republican state. New Hampshire was a solidly Republican state. Rhode Island, New Jersey. Things change. Trump's genius was that he was able to look at a certain area of the country and change the map beneath their feet. The media and the Democratic Party are going to work together to push the kind of electoral map, to push the rules of engagement in our election, so to speak, in a way that is favorable to them. Romney fell into that trap wholeheartedly. Romney decided that nothing was worth competing for outside of the traditional electoral map. That he had no chance. He had to win back Virginia. He had to carry Ohio. That's it. That's as far to the Rust Belt that he thought he could go. He briefly made a fake into Pennsylvania. That was not a serious effort. And one day I'll tell you the backstory about how that happened. But it was not a serious effort. He needed to win back North Carolina and win back Florida. That was Romney's strategy, and then figure out which one he was going to pluck away, whether it be Iowa or New Hampshire, and he played for them to combine their very small, relatively small electoral vote count. But even if he would have been able to do that, that entire strategy would have hinged on him running the table in all of these other states that were the cookie cutter electoral map that the media gave to the Republican Party, that the Washington conventional wisdom gave to the Republican Party. The Democrats did not break through the red wall by believing in a wall. They decided they were going to go back after the South. Jimmy Carter won his home state. Bill Clinton won Kentucky twice, albeit there was always a fractured third-party vote for Bill Clinton. In a lot of the states Bill Clinton won, he benefited from that. And even in the national vote, Bill Clinton never won a majority support in this country. Never. His approval rating only went high later in the impeachment scandal, and that is the only time he ever enjoyed a really favorable majority opinion of him in the country. Both of his election cycles were very tight, very up against the wall, but he did not limit himself to the concept of walls. Barack Obama certainly did not. If you look at George W. Bush's margins of victory, Indiana, Virginia itself, even came close in Missouri, barely won North Carolina, although I think it was pretty clear George Washington University made a very good argument. He didn't really win North Carolina. That was some funny business going on there. But it doesn't matter. And by the way, John McCain knew about it. Just he lost so handily, it wouldn't have mattered. But Barack Obama did not limit himself to what he thought was and was not a winnable state. Donald Trump's genius was that he said he knew he would do better with some of that was strategy, folks. White working class. He knew he was going to be able to really run up the vote there, or at least that was the plan. And when you look at some of these traditional battlegrounds, Nevada, Colorado, even New Mexico, it's not a battleground anymore. Even in Florida, thought to be too diverse to really be battleground states for a candidate like Donald Trump. So he would have to run through whiter states that had voted Democratic. In the end, he took them all. Almost all of them. But if you look at even going back to 68 and you read that article in the New York Times, you will see that they did not get Minnesota. That is how people always say, why did you argue Minnesota was a battleground? How did you know it was going to be close? Because I don't believe in walls. Not in the sense that others do anyway. It was clear populism was at the center of his message. Populism is the reason that Democrats have held that state for as many years as they have. The Democratic Party in Minnesota is not even the National Democratic Party. It is still their root populist Democratic Party. They never disbanded and became a part of the National Coalition. That's how important populism and working class messages are in a state like Minnesota. It was not going to be. This again is the genius of Donald Trump. His appeal was attitudinal. Weaver argued as if personality wasn't going to matter, caste only mattered. For the most part, sadly, I know a lot of people believe that. But Donald Trump's appeal was always attitudinal. It's more so now about politics because they have worked and hammered, and he's helped them cast him in the very conventional light as far as who should support Donald Trump and who should not. But in 2016, that was not like that. If you were a working class Hispanic in a certain area of the country, you were far more likely to support Donald Trump than you were to support Mitt Romney. If you were a working class Hispanic in the state of Florida, even in some of the white Rust Belt states that have small populations of Hispanics, you are much more likely to support Donald Trump than if you are a Hispanic in Nevada. Again, a conventional for Mitt Romney, conventional battleground state that you should focus money on instead of blue wall states, because they're in the blue wall. And that's a wall. You can't go through a wall. Walls get smashed. Republicans used to consider Virginia part of that was the start of their red wall in the South. Virginia was the start of their red wall. Barack Obama took it after George Bush won it by 7 points. And then they haven't gotten it back since. Nevada was considered part of Republicans' Western Wall. George W. Bush did win it. Barack Obama took it. They haven't gotten it back since. Other states fell in line a lot sooner. And that, of course, demographics, and I'm not arguing that demographics have nothing to do with it. What I am arguing is political coalitions shift. Black voters were reliably Republican for many years. That stopped after the Civil Rights Act, even though they relied on Republican senators to get that vote through. Lyndon Johnson played that very wisely. And Nixon, while he did fairly well with black voters, actually, he did excellent according to today's Republican standard. He was the tail end of a trend heading down. Republicans used to do better with Western Hispanics. Now they're the reason why they can't win a state like Nevada or New Mexico and have difficulty in Colorado. Southern whites used to be a Democrat constituency. Now they can barely win them. But again, look at a state. Here's another perfect example where candidates and issues can, of course, outweigh the partisan voting index of a state. How did Doug Jones beat Roy Moore? Candidate mattered. It did matter who the candidate was. Right? How did Scott Brown win in Massachusetts? The candidate mattered. At least at that time. Of course, it's hard to hold something, but Democrats put in efforts. They didn't win some of these states overnight. Nevada wasn't won overnight. Virginia was not won overnight. They put policies in place to change those states to be more favorable to them. Republicans don't do that. Much like we see them do during this current flare-up of race relations in this country right now. Republicans are always reactive. They are not proactive. Democrats are proactive. And Republicans are either reactive or on the defensive. And in politics, if you are on the defense, if you are being reactive and not proactive, you are losing. And you can see it from the Electoral College to the news cycle, to the trend in the Electoral College to the news cycle. Republicans simply are not aggressive enough, is a good word. There are states now, which we're going to talk about this week, which is why I'm doing this today, to tee up some more in-depth, more detailed stuff about where we're going this week. We're going to look at 2 states that Republicans should be able to identify in the electoral map and say, we can win these demographically, culturally. We can win these states, which is what they should have done when Donald Trump won 3 years ago. Instead of Paul Ryan trying to make sure that K Street would be all right when he was gone. And instead of resisting the trend that Donald Trump put in place, the political coalition that was changing, that had evolved, instead of resisting that and treating those people like they were unwanted in the Republican Party, they should have embraced it and begun to make moves to be proactive in these areas of the country where they could help to offset some of the losses in the electoral map. Because the trend is not in their favor in some of these areas. Now, Democrats, on the other hand, they have always been great with that. They are much more, far more proactive than Republicans. They see opportunities in Virginia. They see opportunities in Nevada. And now, and they can add Nevada, by the way, to Colorado and New Mexico, which they already, over a course of years, took action to win, to flip. And now they have their sights on several other states. They're going to wrap up the West out there with Arizona if Republicans don't wake up. Although I still think, we've been over the voter analysis. If you guys haven't seen it before, go back and check that out. Joe Biden has to win Maricopa County. That's the end of the story. Arizona is actually a pretty easy state. Donald Trump carried Maricopa by 5 points. Sinema was winning it by big margins, ended up barely squeezing it out because they allowed Democrats to vote for several days. And that last 180,000 ballots that came in from the in-person early vote that was only allowed in liberal precincts tipped it. But over time, those trends have continued to make it harder. And you couple that with the McCain wing of the party being like little babies and wanting to take their ball and go home. There are other states where Republicans culturally and demographically at the same time should have been making moves, but they're behind now because they haven't been. And some of these are going to shock you when we get into them this week. Some of these are going to shock you, and you're going to say, oh, but Rich, they lost that state by this many points. And I'm going to counter that. And also with the caveat that these things do not happen overnight. It never happens overnight. And Democrats understand that. They think about the stuff a lot more. They play long ball. They do. Republicans, their base kind of just wants to, their leaders are essentially traitors to their base. And their base just wants to work and carry on with their life. Conservatism isn't an ideology. It's a way of life. So everything that conservatives vote for and fight for, they do so they could just go on and live their life with their families and their friends and their communities. And they just want to be autonomous. They don't want to constantly. It's not in their nature because their political beliefs are not an ideology. They have another ideology. It's called God, country, community, and they want to enjoy it. Now, liberals are more proactive by nature because liberalism is a true ideology. It replaces core belief systems. I'm not saying this to be political, all right? So I don't want anybody to take this as like I'm digging one or digging the other. I am simply telling you the basics. And you can't understand the rest without understanding the basics. So while Democrats have been loyal to their ideology, they make moves while Republicans are counting counting the birds or something, enjoying the scenery. It's just the way it is. And for Republicans to truly think they can be competitive in the more long term, they're going to have to get in the game like that. They're going to have to get some kind of self-awareness of who they are, and they're going to have to get in the game. Because Democrats have a big head start on them. And the only way to offset the losses elsewhere is to make them up in gains in other places. It's that simple. And it just so happens that there's an entire region of the country where they could do that. Now, though, that region is not filled with rich targets. We're only talking about a few here and there. But they're there. And they would handicap the ability to put together a winning electoral map coalition. Wow, I'm way over on my last little break here. All right, let me get this out of the way, and then we'll get into some questions. All right. And then tomorrow we're going to get into one of those states, and I'll reveal that state when we get back into it, because I'm looking at quite a few up here. All right, but it is, as of now, just turned 11:35 on Monday, June 16th, 15th. Yeah, I'm blind. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris, and you guys can follow me on Twitter if you don't already, right there at Peoples_Pundit. If you are new to the show, which looks like there are some of you who are, don't watch on Periscope. Go to YouTube. Madam Producer, give them the YouTube link if you haven't already. I'm not really looking. Thank you if you did. But we got to get you guys off that Periscope. It's just too damn laggy, The quality on YouTube is much, much better. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube page, YouTube channel, People's Pundit Daily, and hit the little notification bell. That'll let you know before we go on live. And then also, if you guys watch on Facebook Live, even if you don't, mosey on over to the Facebook page for People's Pundit Daily. And don't forget to give it a like. We'll love you back for it. All right. The best way, of course, to support the show is to subscribe to the best data journalism website on the internet, People's Pundit Daily. You can do that by going to peoplespunditdaily.com or taking the short link, ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. And I just want to thank everybody who has done that since we started the show. I am a numbers guy and love me my trends. And there is no doubt there is an undeniable trend in the number of subscriptions since we started this show. And we thank you for it. That is the ultimate way to support the show. And then, like I said, if you guys really want to, then I'm sure that they'll give you the PayPal.me thing, but we'd rather you subscribe and get some actual value for your money. All right. So let's get into this. And let's look. I've been told here to not look, but okay. We'll talk about that. Everything that's going on, a Trump supporter tends to look at it and say, the anarchy, which is the word they used, that was a good word. But the civil unrest that is going on, I don't know how it can't help Trump. Because Democrats are obviously behind this. The bottom line is the danger there to think like that is that it hurts Donald Trump's main justification. That's number one, which is that he was going to make America great again. This is not great watching this happen. And I'm not saying it cannot be tailored to explain or even work in his benefit. I'm saying right now, that's not being done correctly. Make America great again meant, like I said in the beginning of the show, it meant stopping the craziness. It meant law and order. It meant stopping the foreign policy from sapping our wealth and our jobs and our young men. And it meant a resurgence of the American economy, bringing back manufacturing, wages growing again. That was the genius, too, of a Make America Great Again slogan, because in it wraps up everything else. What Democrats are trying to do by going with these riots, the COVID shutdown. People who fell for it. Look, I get it, but you got to learn your lesson and move on. That was a very clear attempt to cut his Achilles heel, which was the strong economy, and to go and strike at the heart of his justification. So now they can run ads like they are now, saying Donald Trump told you he was going to be the jobs president. 47 million people filed for unemployment benefits. Donald Trump told you he was going to make America great again. Look at the civil unrest in the street. Is this what it looks like when America is great again? So think about it in terms like that. Joe Biden's justification, whether you like it or not, is very clear. I'm going to calm everything down. It's been crazy under Trump. It's been a wild ride. And I'm going to stop the boat from rocking. This is what has always been essential question to me. There have really been two for this election cycle. The first one, which we answered, is will Democrats declare their independence from the media, from their party establishment? Because we knew from polling that Democratic voters did not like Joe Biden. I mean, they like him. It's like, if you're likable, but they did not like him. Their heart was not with him. They don't even agree with him on a majority of his positions that he took against Bernie Sanders in the primary. The majority of the Democratic Party is shifted significantly further to the left. They don't agree with Joe Biden on healthcare. They agree with Bernie Sanders. They don't agree with Joe Biden on policing. They agree with Bernie Sanders. And throughout every exit poll, confirmed, or entrance poll, if it was a caucus, confirmed our polling, which is that their heart was with Bernie and they wanted to vote with Bernie. They were convinced by the media and by their party establishment that Bernie Sanders could not win. And that is why they turned against Bernie Sanders. It wasn't just a consolidation of the black vote. That would not have been enough. Bernie was winning in Hispanics, and he was even doing very well with younger black voters in the Democratic primary until that painted brush stuck. And, think of it like that. You painted him with the brush, and it dried before he got a chance to wash it off. So Democratic voters got it in their heads that the Democratic Party was right, that the media was right, that Bernie Sanders cannot win. He can't beat Donald Trump, and we'll be throwing the election away if we nominate Bernie Sanders, even though we want to nominate Bernie Sanders. And they did. That's clear. Some of it is more clear than others, like in a place like California, a state like California. So they abandoned the core of the party, abandoned Bernie Sanders for Joe Biden and his justification, which was, I will stop rocking the boat. So that answered my first question. Can they, like Republicans did in 2016, can Democrats vote autonomously? Or does the media do the media and the party establishment still pick the Democratic nominee? Because the Republicans could not, and Fox News could not in 2016. Republicans decided, thank you for your opinion, and thank you for your polls that say he's the only candidate who can beat her, which in reality was completely backwards. Donald Trump was ever the only candidate who could have beaten Hillary Clinton. Marco Rubio would have lost. Ted Cruz would have lost. And to all the people out there who still doubt me on that, which Rust Belt state was Ted Cruz going to flip? I'll wait. Which Rust Belt state was Jeb Bush going to flip? Crickets from these people. Crickets from the Jonah Goldbergs. Crickets from the Bill Kristols. Crickets from them all. They can't answer that. All the people who once used to work on Fox but now don't. They never answer that question because they can't answer it. Was Jeb Bush going to win Michigan? Which counties were he going to flip? Donald Trump flipped 12 of them. Which of those 12 counties in the state of Michigan that voted for Barack Obama then went for Donald Trump would Jeb Bush have won? I can't answer you. I'm just going to go vote for this guy. I can't answer you. So I'm going to take my ball, go home, and I'm going to vote for him. All right, Jonah. Sorry. I don't want to hurt your feelings. Which of the Rust Belt states was Jeb Bush going to flip or Ted Cruz going to flip? Was he going to win with either one of them going to win Wisconsin? Were they going to flip the Bow Wows? Were they going to run it up in the Northwest and take every single county, including Douglas and the rest of them? Which one of those counties were going to go first, Jonah? Oh, shut up. I'm just going to go vote for this guy. Nobody ever comes up with an actual argument. They never come up with an actual argument. He was the only one who was ever going to win. And Republican voters knew that, and they declared their independence. So one of my major questions this year was, would Democrats be able to do the same? And the answer was no. They were not able to do the same. They cannot think autonomously for themselves. How do we know that? How can we prove that? I'm not trying to hurt anybody's damn feelings here. It's a fact. We can prove it very simply. The heart of the party was with Bernie Sanders. They had a more favorable opinion of Bernie Sanders, and they agreed with Bernie Sanders on every single one of the major issues that were voting issues that were polled, that were voting issues that were gathered during the exit polling itself. They did not agree with Joe Biden on the level as they agreed with Bernie Sanders, but they told him that they could not win. Bernie could not win, and they believed it. That is now proven. They cannot make up their own minds. Democrats vote how the media master tells them to vote. Sorry, if you don't like it, nominate somebody else next time. Think for yourself next time. You voted for the guy they told you to vote for the reasons they told you to vote for him. So don't get pissy at me because you can't think for yourself. Question 1 asked, answered. The second one was whether or not the American people were really ready for what Donald Trump promised them. Are you really ready to stop the global elites from imposing the order they seek to impose, which necessarily requires America to be diminished as a national, as a hegemon, as a nation state, which means the hollowing out of your communities. It means no wage growth because we're importing low wage workers who will vote for people who will continue those policies. In 2016, Americans said, I had it. Nobody asked me whether or not I wanted my country to turn into this. I've had it, and I want this guy to go stop him. Well, the smartest thing Steve Bannon ever said was they were not just going to sit back and take it, folks. They were not going to let this guy roll into D.C. on a donkey and change it and smash K Street up and give you back your power. They definitely weren't going to allow a political newcomer with no public office experience to speak of accomplish everything they've been promising to accomplish it for you for decades, but never did. Then that is all on the surface talk. They were not going to allow an former insider who betrayed them for you to be an outsider come in and clean up their good thing. Not without a fight. They were not going to just roll over and take it because Donald Trump promised to end endless wars. They were not going to roll over and take it because Donald Trump promised to sign away TPP, to withdraw from TPP. If you haven't read it on People's Pundit Daily, you want to go see the money that was behind the number one, the lobbying of TPP, and then who stood to make how much from that deal. And we look at Paul Ryan before anybody says this is about to be a partisan talking point. It's not. Paul Ryan's problem with Donald Trump was not one of virtue, morality, and even ideology to speak of. Paul Ryan's problem with Donald Trump is that he was not invited to the club, and the millions of dollars that his benefactors gave him to ensure TPP would get through was about to get pissed away. They were not going to let that man do that. They were not going to let this man come into Washington, D.C., to take control of the highest office in the land, the top executive, who could look down and see all the corruption in the FISA court, to see all the corruption in the intelligence communities, to see all the corruption in the military. They were not just going to sit back and let someone else be president. The presidency is the center of the information workflow in this world, not just this country, in the world. The man or woman who sits in the White House knows more than any other person on planet Earth. Donald Trump knew immediately what they did with Spygate. That's why he tweeted out, just found out Obama wiretapped me. That's the way he talks. That's the kind of like provocation he makes. But they were not just going to sit back and let it happen. Boats were going to rock. Foundations were going to crack. It was always going to be a constant drumbeat meant to get you to get tired of it. That is what all of this aims to do. They don't give a damn about whether they were right or wrong. They don't care they told you a lie for 3 years about your president being a traitor. That's not what this was intended to do. First of all, that plan was intended to get him impeached, to sway you in the 2018 elections, so you would give them both chambers so they could impeach him and get rid of him. But you didn't give them the upper chamber, which is why, by the way, and that was a bipartisan plan. So if you're a Republican, don't just blame the Democratic Party. Do you think it was an accident that all of those Republicans decided to retire? I mean, that's not how this works, folks. That's not how this. Go back and find me a comparable election where you'll see that many retirements. I'll give you a little homework assignment. They both wanted him gone. They all wanted him gone. And my question was, can Americans really take this? Were they really ready for real change? Like, I mean, there's always a candidate who comes around like Obama and promises hope and change. But my little coin saying, it was pretty clear very early in Obama's administration that there was no hope, no real hope for real change. That was nothing but a campaign slogan, not the kind of change he promised. There was only change in a more, radical statist government. That's it. And a change in what isn't acceptable in society that drastically moved the culture to the left. That's one thing you could definitely say. But Americans, were they really ready to shake the foundations of the status quo, to really change the status quo? If you look in the exit polls in 2016, bringing needed change, real change, Donald Trump crushed her on. And that was very important to the electorate. Bringing real change. They felt like they had been lied to. They liked Obama, but they didn't feel like they were lied to. They liked Obama personally. They thought he was a cool dude, but he lied to them about real change. He lied. What his promise was a lie. And that was huge to the voters, especially in the battleground states. And they said, damn it, I've had it. I want somebody who's going to bring a wrecking ball and destroy this all and build it back from the ground up. This all has to go. It's too corrupt. It's too much against me. They don't listen to me. They don't listen to my family. They don't give a damn about us. They're doing what they're doing while my community is being destroyed. And the smartest thing Steve Bannon said was, they're not just going to roll over and take it. Americans didn't realize, because they got it good, they've gotten spoiled, they've gotten selfish and distracted. And what Americans did not realize, millions of them who voted for Donald Trump, is that you're not in charge anymore. You haven't been in charge for a long time. This is all an illusion. And the minute you try to exert that authority, which is your rightful authority as a sovereign voter, that is how our social contract is written. But the minute you try to exert that authority, to exercise it, you're going to find out what an illusion it is. You're going to find out quick. And it's been so corrupt, so dirty, you don't even know they're running psyops on you to get you to throw out the guy anyway. And it's been, that's been the central question. Were Americans really ready for this? Were they really ready? Did they have the resolve to see this through? Do they? Is really, we're not past tense here. Do they have the resolve to see through what they started in 2016? How badly did you really want change? How much were you really willing to fight? How deep into the abyss did you really want to look? Because the one thing about Donald Trump is that he really shows us how ugly we are, how much hate we're capable of. I'm not talking about himself. He draws it out of people. The big media hate machine pushed the hell out of it for 3 years. Then he makes us look into the mirror, and we don't like what we see. And that is really the question 2020 will answer. Did they know what they were doing when they demanded real change? Because nothing was ever going to change unless they did something radically different. But the administrative state was never just going to sit back and take it. They were going to fight back. They like being in charge. They don't give a damn about you. And that's it. All right, 3 minutes left for like 10. Madam Producer's been screaming at me. Answer some questions. What questions? Send them to me, and I'll answer them. I mean, I'll scroll a little bit. It's just so good. Folks, it's hard to scroll through. So if I missed a question that you asked, I'm leaving like 3-4 minutes here for you to re-ask them. If I see it new on the feed, I'll leave the feed up because I don't normally do it. But while I wait for that, let's go to our first state here. Okay. The first state we will look at is Connecticut tomorrow. Okay. And I'll end it there because there's the damn question. But there's your preface. We're going to look at Connecticut tomorrow. The partisan affiliation looks daunting, but I'm going to get into a couple things and explain to you, again, these things don't happen overnight. And number two, why the partisan affiliation can be a little bit deceiving. All right. Hey, Rich, question about the Supreme Court rulings today. Trump ran on giving us a conservative Supreme Court for Gorsuch today to blow it all up. How does this not crush Trump's campaign? One or two rulings, and I did see something on that before. I didn't have a chance to really dig into it. Gorsuch is a textualist, okay? Yeah, I assume you're talking about the gay and transgender workers from discrimination, correct? Just to make sure, because they're, yeah, okay. Neil Gorsuch, it's not really correct to call him a conservative. The Federalist Society is a joke. If you are like, that's another article, but I mean, that's another show. Republicans got to stop allowing the Federalist Society to pick their judges, their nominees. But I will say this, and people like us, again, that's why you should subscribe to the best data journalism website on the internet. We looked at Gorsuch's record. Gorsuch's record did not really suggest he was a traditional conservative, which you may agree with this or you may not. But sometimes in the culture wars, a textualist, which is what he is, a textualist is not going to rule how a conservative would want them to rule. They read the text of the court and that's it. They're not going to try to imply the founders' value system. Of course, the founders would not have been okay with transgender and gay marriage and outward displays of any kind of sexual activity, whether it was hetero or homosexual. They wouldn't even have thought to put something like that in the Constitution because they would not have thought that they would have had to. And in fact, if you read Adams and others, effeminate behavior was one of the main gripes they had with the British overlords. They didn't view them to be like men anymore, sufficient men, but Gorsuch is not a conservative, not in the not a judicial jurisprudence conservative. He's not. He's a textualist. But that being said, Trump's judges are going to, his judicial record is going to be something that's going to be, almost, that would not be viewed as his fault. So, he's got a whole lot of talking points. We've done an article on that too. I mean, he's flipped district courts now. New York, down here in our district court. I'm talking about the Circuit Court of Appeals, the one that oversees Atlanta and Florida, one in New York, and then he's even made damage with the Ninth Circus. So, I mean, one ruling, I know it sucks for people who are conservative, but one ruling doesn't really weigh. Something like this will not weigh. And actually, I have to say this. Trump was the first pro-gay, pro-transgender Republican. Go back and listen to his nomination speech. I imagine he'd probably not care that much personally about this ruling, folks. The media makes him out to be anti-gay and anti-transgender. He doesn't give a damn, really, about this stuff. And when it comes to gay marriage, he was the first Republican to openly say at a convention that he was pro-gay marriage, and the crowd applauded him. And he even made mention of how happy he was that the Republican Party was different than it used to be. So, I mean, that's it. Yeah, and the Second Amendment cases are a little bit more severe, Joyce. This is why Donald Trump, he went right up to the line on pissing off Second Amendment voters. He pulled back at the right time, but his red flag support is a real problem. That was really stupid. All right, let me see if I can get one more in here because we are over time. I just want to say this. Just remember, folks, we will have these days where I'm not going to be able to. It'll be like a last minute thing. Something will happen with the House. As of right now, I do intend to do Connecticut next. So it is potential that we'll have to go to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Just keep an eye out. I'll always tweet about it. I won't ever do it last minute, like, oh, it's 10 o'clock, we'll try to give you as much notice as possible. But how about this? We'll wrap up some of these Supreme Court things in the next show. I'll save some time. The news du jour, the daily du jour kind of thing, the news du jour, I'll put the court decisions in there. But I really think it's important we look at this map because that's the long term. Again, Democrats play long ball. Republicans, they just want to kind of live their lives. And if you're a Republican and you want to make sure that things, go your way in the future, they've got to start thinking differently. They have to start thinking bigger and longer term. Everybody wants to live their life. What's the point on voting and winning if you can't enjoy your life, right? I get that. But there always has got to be one eye on life and one eye on what the other side is doing, because we have this incredible energy in this country to topple everything. It's not just a matter anymore of whether or not you agree or disagree with somebody. They don't like anything this country stands for. I'm not saying all of it, and I don't even think the majority of Democratic voters feel that way. I think they just don't know that the radical elements of that vote, they would have been fine, folks, with Bernie Sanders if they thought he could have beaten Donald Trump. They never would have gotten behind Biden. But in the end, they concluded that Bernie Sanders could not defeat him. So they bailed on him. But that doesn't mean they don't agree with him fully. It doesn't mean that. They're going to use Biden like a puppet he is. Biden's a sad old man, I mean, he's really a sad old man. All right. I know I'm there. All right. It's already 12:04. Look, folks, thanks for watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. And don't forget, if you don't already, to follow me on Twitter and subscribe to the YouTube channel, People's Pundit Daily. All right. We're almost to that first milestone. The more subscriptions we get, the more viewers we'll get. So that's helpful if you share it with people you think are would be interested in the show. Also, don't forget to mosey on over if you're Facebook users and like the page People's Pundit Daily as well. Like the page, subscribe to the channel. But ultimately, the best way to support the show, of course, is to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily. And you can do that by going to ppdnews.us/subscribe. pbdnews.us/subscribe. And don't forget, we got credit tiers. I see a couple of you trying to experiment with that. I can recognize your show and your hand and I recognize your name when I see the subscriptions. Yeah, that's cool. So if you just like to look at the charts, then you can do that. And it's not like a monthly or annual commitment. All right, folks, I'm going to kick rocks. I'm going to head on out of here. Enjoy Bad Habit, and we'll see you 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. All the best.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. There's rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Take a one-way ride, steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to disappear overnight, just to give into the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow